Hey, Steve Saretsky here. As always, there's going to be a couple descriptions, blog posts that go with everything that I say here, so check that out below. If you haven't already, go visit my site. It's vancitycondoguide.com. That's where I've got all the blog stats, keep you updated on the markets, everything that's going on. But basically, wanted to put this video together. I mean, there hasn't been a whole lot going on in terms of what I haven't already talked about. Just want to talk about basically a couple events that have transpired, this week and really over the last week as well. First off, CMHC releasing their quarterly report, basically saying that the Vancouver real estate market is starting to enter into that overheated target or segment once again. And if you actually look at the report, it's basically dived into it and said that all that growth is coming from condos. And so essentially, if you've been watching any of these videos or my blogs, I've basically been telling you that for the last several months now, that this growth was all coming from the condo market. So if you actually look at it from a year-over-year perspective, okay, so everybody's like, I get all these people asking, emails or in the comments here that are asking about specific areas, or if I give you a certain stat and say, well, that's not happening in my area, I'm looking at all the signs down the road and this and that, giving me anecdotal things. Okay, so I'm going to pull the Vancouver numbers, and basically what's happening in Vancouver might not necessarily be what's happening in your neighborhood in Langley or in Surrey or New Westminster. But what's happening in Vancouver, again, generally, these markets are all interconnected. Like if you're, if prices go up 20% in Vancouver, then they're going to go up in Richmond and Burnaby and likewise. It's the same thing if there's a price correction. Like there's no like one area is safe because it's still affordable. It's all relative, right? So the detached market in Vancouver year over year, if you're looking at the average sales price and the median sales price, which are two non-manipulated stats, they are, that's real-time data. There's no sort of weird price algorithm like the the MLS benchmark. So if you're looking at that on a year-over-year basis for June, Vancouver detached house prices are down 8%. So now you can say a lot of that is coming from the high end, certainly on the west side, where you have homes that are above $3-4 million. That market is extremely soft right now. Maybe not extreme, it's soft. And so that's pushing some of the prices down. I would say for the most part, if it's in the east side, 1.5 to 2 million, it's still selling well. We're still seeing some multiple offers. But for the most part, even at that lower end scale, prices are not, for the detached market, are essentially, they're down 8% from a statistical point, but if you want to generalize it, for the most part, they're essentially flat year over year. There's been basically no price appreciation, and all of the price appreciation now is coming from condos. I think Vancouver year to date is up about 14%. It's still growing. Prices are still increasing by 2% every month. What I explained to you in the last video, the sales to active ratio for a one-bedroom condo on the east side of Vancouver hit 200%. That has never been seen before. And so when you get that sort of mania activity, that just is going to continue to push condo prices up and up and up and up. So, obviously if we're going at 2% a month, that's 24% a year. So that's where CMHC is getting it from their overheated stuff. So if you're looking at that report and trying to figure it out, or understanding that message, that's what that means. And just a couple other things. You've talked a lot on the Home Capital Group front. This was Canada's largest mortgage alternative lender. And there was an interesting video on BNN the other day. It's Canada's Finance Minister Bill Morneau. There's a lot of debate, maybe conspiracies that, as if all of a sudden Warren Buffett just sort of rides in and bails out this feeling lender. Like, obviously he got a very sweet deal, but basically Bill Morneau was on the show, essentially gloating. I'm going to put a link to it. Essentially gloating about how he had a hand in courting Warren Buffett, and basically talked about how he pumped up the Canadian economy and the real estate markets, and so I found that very interesting, that initially this was a guy that came out when this whole home capital stuff looked like it was just going to go right into the tank. He was basically coming out and saying, oh, it's not an issue, it's not going to spread, it's not a big deal. But then meanwhile, you have literally the two biggest guys. You had Justin Trudeau and you had Bill Morneau go to Seattle and have a private dinner with Buffett to bring in the top two guns to all of a sudden talk Canadian real estate. To me, that sounds fishy. You say one thing and do the other. So I find that just interesting from a viewer's perspective to watch these markets and see really what's going on, behind the curtains. There's all these politicians like to talk, and they're talking about affordability and helping with prices and pushing to get elected, and then you can see all the strings that are basically being manipulated behind the curtains. Of course, I would say the BC government's home loan program, which was heavily scrutinized by the CMHC, that was brought in. You can't tell me that the people that are advising Christy Clark from an economic standpoint do not understand what they're doing. Clearly it was a play to increase first-time buyers entering the market to keep things moving along. You cannot tell me that was a play to actually help people with home ownership, help with affordability. All it's done is help drive up prices. As you've seen in Vancouver, a 2% increase in condo prices every month right now. You have the sales to active ratio for one-bedroom condos on the east side hitting 200%, never been seen before. And so all this sort of manipulation behind the scenes. So we'll look to see what happens here. Obviously, the NDP has come in. I've said this from the get-go that again, politicians will make promises pre-election. A lot of it, I think, what they've talked about. I don't know if it gets implemented, and I don't know if it does. How long does that take? And so you're always just looking to see these little plays behind the scenes. Something that obviously people never talk about. There's a good article from Bloomberg today, and I know I'm sort of rambling on. This is the last sort of thing I want to touch on, but is essentially the Canadian the covered bond mortgage market, and essentially what these banks do in order to fund new mortgages, in order to again to keep prices elevated, you have to keep creating new mortgages. You have to keep creating new people to enter the market. And all the European investors are essentially buying these covered Canadian bonds, really at an incredible pace. Basically, these banks are just trying to offload them, the government as well. It's essentially what it is. It's essentially like a bond. It's a yield like a normal bond, but it's backed by Canadian mortgages. And so, it's interesting because I think. You can look at the Canadian real estate market as a whole, obviously what's going on in Toronto, and say, how safe is that bond? But it's being sold as an extremely safe bond. So it's interesting. We're looking at Toronto, talking to some Toronto friends. If you're from Toronto, comment in the comments below. Let me know what's going on there. Just talking to a couple of my realtor friends that work over there. I think they were telling me. The detached prices are down something like 10% now, and that's over the last couple months. So I think that's very interesting. I'm watching that play to see if it starts to resemble sort of a Vancouver esque feeling, because what happened here was when that foreign buyers tax came in, it was starting to cool. You had the detached market starting to cool, even the condo market a little bit, and then you brought in that foreign buyers tax, and it just like instantly, I would say, in a couple month window here, we had prices dropping about 10% in the detached market, and then of course, sellers that were basically listing their homes for sale, that were sitting on the market, and maybe they do a price reduction. They just like, this isn't selling. I'm going to take it off. I'm going to wait for the market to rebound, and then I'm going to relist it. And so what we saw was just a massive purge and new listing. I think in January was something like a 50% drop off year over year. Basically, people were like, I'm not going to sell. And so everybody that was in the market looking to buy, as you entered that busy or spring buying season, there wasn't much to buy, and so people started to go back and look at these homes that were maybe sitting on for 30, 60 days, and going back and making offers on them, and that started to get the ball rolling. And of course, we had that that resurgence in the detached market where prices picked up in the spring. And of course, now the last couple months, they basically flatlined again. And so again, if you look at it on a year-over-year scale, it's still down about 8%. And again, that could vary by area, but that's the crux of it. I think if Vancouver's down 8%, who knows when the market goes, but I think it's just a matter of time where New West follows, or Richmond or Surrey follows. So yeah, it's interesting. That's all some tidbits on the Vancouver real estate market. If you're not already, subscribe to me. I'll try to keep you updated. Or if you want to interact, hit me up on Twitter. It's just at Steve Saretsky. That's where I really do most of my research and conversations, debating, and hanging out with you guys. All right. I hope that helped, and talk to you soon.